The October 21st, 2021 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. First of all, I want to say that there are blue cards by the door. Are they by the door, Mark? Yeah. And also an agenda by the door. On the back of the agenda, there's a meeting protocol, so please look that over if you are interested in speaking, and fill out a blue card and hand that to Mr. Shipley. And he will call on members of the audience when the time comes. If you're interested in an item that's on the agenda, you'll be called to speak when that item is being talked about. If not, if it's not an item on the agenda, you'll be called when we have citizens forum. But please look at the meeting protocol and abide by that, please. Item number 1 is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Remove two things.
Oh, sorry.
The agenda items number 7 and number 9 have been requested to be removed from the agenda by the applicants.
Okay, and would you tell us what those two are and who the
number
applicants are that
7.
requested the drop?
Yeah, number 7 is the discussion on ball field lighting. And number 9 was the discussion to amend subdivision regulations in relation to state lots and the requirement for connectivity.
And the applicant on both of these, and who are they, requested it be withdrawn? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I move to approve the amended agenda, removing items 7 and 9.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to item number 2, approval of the minutes for the September 16th, 2021 meeting.
Move for approval. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 3, discussion and public hearing on a utility plan to replace the primary electric and new primary electric that will be placed within a conduit on portions of Sugarwood subdivision, DMI contracting applicant.
This is a LCUB project. MDI is the contractor that's going to be doing the work for them. And basically, this is just, there's some old underground electric cable that was installed probably in the late 70s and 80s. And it's going bad and causing outages. So basically what they're doing is just replacing it with new electric cable. And while they're doing that, they're putting it in a conduit to help prevent the issues that they've had with these older lines that they're replacing, so that hopefully it will prevent outages in the future. It involves, at this point, it affects portions of Sugarwood Drive, Butternut Lane, Nutwood Circle, Big Tree Drive, and Fruitwood Lane in Sugarwood. They will be doing the work through directional boring and coordinating the work with the town's engineering staff. The staff recommends approval subject to the 3 conditions that were listed, and that is coordinating the erosion and traffic control with the town's engineering department, restoring the affected areas to their pre-construction condition, and then providing an as-built location of the new conduit.
Is the applicant represented?
They are not. That's why I asked LCUB to send me a layman's description of what they're doing. So that's basically what they're doing. So it's a maintenance project.
Will they be going into other parts of the Sugarwood, or is?
I do not know.
Okay.
I assume it's probably they're phasing it, and they probably have other areas that probably are working on in the future.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I have a question, Mark. This, Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Sugarwood were platted, final platted July of '83.
Yes.
So was this the typical way things were installed at that time, in that time frame? I'm asking how many other neighborhoods are we going to see affected this way?
Good question.
I don't know the answer to that.
It's pretty unusual to use direct burial, so I think this was probably right when the transition from overhead power, like what you see maybe in Village Green, to underground power.
Okay.
But definitely in the early 90s, everything was put in conduit just to prevent things like this. So I'm not saying it's isolated in the town. Obviously, other neighborhoods that have underground power that are of the same vintage could have the same issue because that's what was required at the time. But I'm thankful that LCUB is willing to do
Yep.
all the directional bore piece. Quite frankly, I mean that they could open trench all that and just make a big old mess and just come back and try to seed and straw it. And I think they're going above and beyond trying to be as delicate as possible under the circumstances.
I guess what my question was more is we need to be prepared if in fact this was something that happened in quite a few neighborhoods. I don't know how many were built between, I know we started maturing in the late 80s, early 90s, so we may see this again.
Yeah, I would definitely think early 90s it was in conduit. So
Okay.
it just depends on what neighborhoods are of that same. I mean, like Fort West would be after this. I'm trying to think some other neighborhoods that would be kind of similar. I mean, Hickory Woods I think is actually mostly overhead anyway. But
Concord Hills is underground. It was
Yeah,
in the
Concord
it was
Hills-
in the 70s.
yeah, Concord Hills may be a candidate for something like this at some point in the future.
From previous projects that they've done, they have a schedule of as such, I guess you'd call it, that every so many years they
Okay.
will look at these things.
The other question I had was, you mentioned in here the possibility of a letter of credit to ensure proper completion of returning everything to the way it pre-disturbance condition. I don't know, have we worked with MDI contracting before? Do we have any
Yeah, we
issues
have.
with them?
Not to my knowledge, we have worked with them some. That's just a question for you all. I didn't put it as one of our recommendations because we're dealing with LCUB, which is a local entity.
And they've been good about dealing with, coming back if things aren't satisfactory. Certainly the neighborhood will have a lot of say in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And we have a good relationship with them, and if there are issues, we have people that we can communicate those to, I think. And
Okay.
we're comfortable with it without the letter of credit.
Anybody else with any questions or comments?
I think one of the stipulations is that they send out notices to the residents.
Yeah, and they did say they were definitely doing that, if they haven't already.
Do you want to include that as an additional stipulation?
It actually looks like the cover letter kind of looks like it was generated just for that. If you read,
Yeah.
doesn't it start out by saying "Dear valued customer"? So it looks like that they're
Yeah, it
already
was.
they've already at least drafted the framework to be able to send that letter
And
out.
it's not been sent out yet because the
We can
president
add
of
that.
HOA.
But they're probably waiting for our approval before and the contractor schedule.
Okay.
But
You want to add number 4 to the motion, notify, who made the motion?
do we have a motion yet?
I haven't
don't
yeah,
have
that one yet.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking Board of Mayor and Alderman. We used to do the motion. Notify the affected residents as number 4.
Yeah, this letter's dated September 20th,
Yeah.
but as a resident of Sugarwood, I've not received one, so.
Yeah, we'll add that. That's fine.
And they could really just drop it in their monthly bill would be
Yeah.
the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, do I have a motion or?
I'm going to move to approve with the 4 subject twos.
I'll second.
Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A zoning, Chapter 3, Section 1, Agricultural District A, to provide for a second dwelling unit on a lot of record and delete subsection C, uses permitted as special exceptions. Carrie Archer, applicant.
Yeah, this is an item we talked about for workshop purposes last month, and the applicant has requested the opportunity to provide for a second dwelling unit on an existing lot of record in the agricultural zoning district. This particular property is in a development that requires 5-acre minimum lot sizes, and that's also the required minimum lot size in agricultural districts. So we were trying to work through some language that's reflected in the ordinance that's before you, and to provide for this opportunity, and at the same time really kind of looking at the district language as a whole and cleaning up, from lack of a better way to put it, some language that really is outdated, frankly, and probably a lot of that stuff is not even doable now with our fire code and subdivision regulation provisions. So it was just an opportunity to address the applicant's request and also clean up some of the language in the agricultural district. We don't really get a lot of activity in this zoning district. In fact, most of the activity we receive is somebody rezoning it to a residential district so that they can develop the property. But there are some provisions that were in the uses permitted as special exception that were really pretty outdated. I don't think we're realistic with the way that the town has evolved over the years. So we've tried to address that in this ordinance and basically provide for the opportunity to have the second dwelling unit with the conditions that mostly we talked about at the workshop session. You know, you have to have a lot that's an existing lot of record. It's at least 5 acres. Doesn't have more than one existing dwelling unit on the lot. It fronts on an existing public street for at least 100 feet. The setbacks are compliant, both the existing and additional dwelling unit with the principal dwelling unit setbacks in the agricultural district. The second dwelling unit is set back at least 50 feet from the existing dwelling unit. And the reason for that is if in the future they were to somehow get that rezoned and try to drop a property line in there, there would be enough space between the two principal buildings to probably be able to meet side setback requirements. So that's the reason for that. Not creating an additional access to a public street. These are probably going to happen on collector streets, so we're trying to minimize additional curb cuts where we can. And then the second dwelling unit would have to satisfy the applicable utility code and fire suppression requirements. So that's kind of the main provisions in Ordinance 21-17. I'd also mentioned in the write-up that I took out reference to off-premise outdoor advertising because that's actually addressed in our sign ordinance. There's really no reason to have it in the zoning district. And then also clarifying the mobile home issue, as there is a differentiation in state law between a single-wide and a manufactured building that has the general appearance of a site-built dwelling unit. So with that, we recommend approval of Resolution PC-21-14, which recommends approval of Ordinance 21-17.
Mark, I have a question.
Okay.
On item number A, the lot is an existing lot of record that's at least 5 acres, and I think we all agreed upon the 5 acre minimum. But I'm wondering why the language existing lot of record is so critical. If there was large farms out there and this was a way to incentivize it, instead of developing it in small lots, well, if you develop it into lots that are at least 5 acres, then you would be eligible, assuming you are in the correct zoning district, then you would be eligible to have this secondary dwelling unit. And is there a rationale that I'm missing of why it's important? Because it kind of seems like you're grandfathering all the existing lots in agriculture that are over 5 acres, and you're saying, well, if any future lots that are not of a lot of record as of the date that this is codified by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, then you're eliminating their ability to do this. Is that our intent?
Well, I could take out the language and just say that the lot is at least 5 acres.
Well, I think that's what we discussed in the workshop, is that the 5 acre minimum, I think to me that was important.
Okay.
I think, and it seems like that was the consensus of the Board of Mayor, the Planning Commission. But I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something about this lot of record language.
Yeah, I mean, you have a scenario that could happen, and so, yeah, I mean, we could take that language out. That was actually the language that was in the workshop, but
wouldn't we also want to incentivize it that all of a sudden somebody says, gosh, if I could buy this lot, and I could, assuming that they're not in a neighborhood with covenant restrictions that prohibit it, but if all of a sudden you could assemble property into one lot that is at least 5 acres, well, that would be an incentive to creating larger lots. We get more open space, less impervious surface. I mean, it seems like we don't want to de-incentivize this. I think this is a good carrot to hang in front of folks when they're maybe thinking about either assembling parcels or developing a large parcel to say, hey, if you're over 5 acres, then you're eligible for this. Otherwise, you're not.
But wouldn't the first step be that you would create a lot of record?
Yeah.
I mean, if we took the word existing out, that kind of implies like it's.
Well, that's true.
Existing.
Well, no, I do think it's
versus
important. I think
your
maybe
grandfather.
maybe the intent was you don't want somebody to say, well, I own this lot, and this lot, and they all combine are at least 5 acres. Of course, if they did that, they'd be eligible for 3 houses. So I can't see why they would want to do that, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not
Would
sure.
the
you
first
just-
step be to form a lot of record?
So say the lot of record is at least 5 acres.
Yeah.
That way you have to assemble it to be 5 acres before you can
If that's your
be
goal.
eligible
Yeah.
for
That
it.
would get rid of the ambiguity relative to its grandfather.
Yeah, I felt like existing was creating a grandfathering scenario.
Yeah.
I agree.
But it's relevant in B and C.
Yeah, what I didn't want to do is somebody to piecemeal 5-acre tracts and go through this process and basically get around the subdivision regulations in a roundabout way.
Right.
Probably unlikely, but somebody that is, potentially could try to do that.
That's a good point.
So that's kind of what that language,
Using
Probably
that
the-
lot of record language.
that's probably that's my recollection of why I had that in there. But I think the way that you have it with the lot of record is at least 5 acres, that probably would be fine.
With modification of A, I would recommend approval of resolution PC 21-14.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
first. Make
Do
sure
you have
she's
any
okay with
questions
it.
or comments?
I don't have any questions, no. I'm Carrie Archer, though. I'm the applicant. But,
Can we give us an address, please?
oh, yeah, my current address, well, I have 2 addresses in Farragut. 400 Saddle Ridge Drive is where I live, though.
Okay.
And then the other address is 13,000 Allen Kirby.
Okay.
Carrie, are you comfortable with this language?
I
that
think so,
We're working
yeah.
on? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions or concerns about this? This is kind of different than what we've done in the town of Farragut for a long period of time, and we've talked about things that are similar to this, but not exactly like this. So I just didn't know if there was anybody here wanting to speak on the topic before we jump right into voting.
Do you guys have any other questions for me?
No.
You pretty well explained it last time around.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, in that case, do we have a motion?
I move for approval with amended language and I to delete the word existing. Approval of resolution PC 21-14.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do you need to do a roll call on this?
Do we need a roll call on the ordinance, Mark?
It's just a resolution. Do we need a?
We haven't done no resolutions before.
I don't think we do, no. I think everybody, as I heard it, everybody
I don't
was
think
in
there was any
favor of it.
dissent in
Yeah.
there, but
No.
there might, I might have missed it.
Oh, we typically do on ordinance, but
Oh, we do?
Not a resolution.
But
Not a
that's at Board of
resolution.
Mayor and Alderman level, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we've done that here.
Not in 30 years.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Stand on.
good luck with it.
I started to say, good luck.
Thank you.
Item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a site plan for the fast-paced health urgent care, 13013 Kingston Pike, 1.85 acres, Zone C-1. Will Robinson and Associates applicant.
This is a site plan for a portion of a property kind of in the west part of town on Kingston Pike, north side of Kingston Pike. The property actually it's narrow and deep, and it actually has secondary frontage on Fleener Road. It is all zoned currently general commercial. I think in the future they do have, and we've had conversation with the applicant about, subdividing off the north part and rezoning it to residential, because frankly, Fleener Road is completely incapable of handling, commercial traffic, and probably not really more than a single-family resident for that size tract. So they're basically developing the southern half of the property. It is a building that's about 3,700 square feet. The parking is to the south and the east, and they are providing a, let's see if I can get this going, cross-access easement running through the front here that abutting properties would tie into as they are developed. And that may be the primary access point through that general area in the future. Since this is the first development to occur in this portion of Kingston Pike. They have a, let's see, we'll show it on this screen, the stormwater detention basins to the north. And basically the building, I'll pull up the color rendering. It's pretty much a almost all brick building. That's what it would look like from the front, and here's the side elevations. Trying to break up the building into smaller modules per our design standards. The original elevation was pretty much a solid color across the sides of the building. So that's pretty much what it looks like, and that's the back part of the building. HVAC units will be on the roof, and they'll be screened with mechanical screening to match the building. The comments related to this item are at your places there. There's a couple of things. First of all, the access will need a variance request from the driveways and other access ways ordinance. The nearest access is to the east, and it's 130 feet from their proposed access. The minimum distance between access points on an arterial street like this is 400 feet, so the request would be for 270 feet for the variance. We would need to take action on that before the site plan. The staff does support the variance request. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first development on this in this general portion of Kingston Pike, and so basically they're kind of establishing the access point for this general area, and the other properties that develop are going to have to take that into consideration when that happens. They may or may not get a separate access point onto Kingston Pike, and that will be evaluated when that comes before you. The access point that they are proposing has a good sight distance. There was a summary of the traffic impact study that was in the packet, and weren't any real issues or concerns with the traffic that would be generated with this use. The site plan did show, as you can see, it does have a deceleration lane coming in. Well, it's a little bit hard to see there, but coming into the property. And there'd be a walking trail constructed across the frontage with at least an 8-foot grass strip separation between the curb of Kingston Pike and the edge of the walking trail. So if y'all want to consider the access variance first, and we'll go to the site plan itself after that if you want.
Does anyone have any questions about the variance in particular that they want to ask either Mark or the applicant?
This is right in and a left out,
No, it's a full access.
It's a full access.
full access? Okay.
I'm going to move to approve a variance from the distance requirements due to the size of the lot. Is that a reason?
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, it's the only developed access in that general area at this point. So,
Okay.
I mean, there's another pretty well-formed access to the east, but they aren't, I mean, it's not really associated with the development currently, and that may have to be modified when
It's
that
kind of an old
property comes in.
abandoned access, the one to the east.
House
Yeah.
driveway, I think, and the house is gone now. So.
Yeah, and it's pretty,
Yep.
it's a pretty substantial access.
Anyone have any questions of the applicant?
I didn't get a second for the
Second.
variance.
Second.
Didn't we turn one down across the street because of the closeness of the,
No, there hasn't been anything on the other side of the street that's Mr. Horn's property. On
it's
the
farther up?
south side.
Okay, it was farther to the west.
Yeah, further.
Was an issue with the old Weigels. We had an issue with the old Weigels and their access, didn't we?
No, it was up next to the liquor store.
Okay.
It's up there.
All right. Do we need to take a vote on the variance?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, you do.
So, we have a first and second on that. All those in favor? Opposed?
In terms of the site plan itself, there's quite a few comments, but I'd say 3/4 of them are, just basically loose ends and paperwork items. Basically just combining all the exterior items into one site plan set, like the lighting. We do have the lighting plan sheets, but they just weren't included with the site plan set. I do not have a tree preservation removal plan yet, but frankly, the property is pretty narrow, and there's really not a lot of opportunities to, work around the tree cover because there's just not a lot of space in that portion of the project. I think the property to the east has a couple of really large trees, but I didn't really see any on this property in the front part. So that's something that is still outstanding. And then there was some other comments dealing with the plans, like the index sheet and trying to use space on the plan sheets better if possible. There is a little closed contour, which I don't think's anything really, but it's kind of in this area here on the KGIS topo. But again, I don't think that really is anything there. It could just be the I don't really know, but it just does need to be evaluated.
I'd be glad to respond to that if you want me to.
Okay.
If it's
Yeah.
proper,
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know, that should have gotten included in the packet pretty early on.
Can you tell us who you are
I'm
and give
very
us an
sorry.
address?
I'm Tim Dunaway. I'm at 717 East Bull Run Valley Drive in high school. I represent the developer. Will Robinson is the applicant. He's our engineer. He's at a planning commission meeting in Red Bank, Tennessee right now as we speak, so he could not be here. But we did get our geotech engineer to do some preliminary drilling for our own purposes, and we had him locate one of the bores exactly in the center of that contour. And I don't have a formal letter from him, but I did submit an email response from him stating that their GEOS's opinion was that it was not a sinkhole. It's a place that looks like an ancient, probably fall-over tree stump pull-up area. It's only about 10 or 12 feet across.
Yeah, it's small. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Well, if he can just get that formal
It will.
study
And the tree
to me.
preservation plan is in the works. I could not get anyone there before this meeting. We've got it grubbed out where that can happen. And if you look at the grading plan, there are some areas on the left and right that are relatively untouched. We're going to do our best to find some trees in that area and protect those and work around them.
Then the other items, just to add a dimension on the parking lot setback, trying to extend the cross-access and walking trails as close to the property lines as you can. I know you can't grade on somebody else's property, but they also need to be to a point where they could be tied into in the future. And then really the other items were just, again, clarifications and your typical comments like letters of credit and drainage fee. They do need a TDOT access permit because they'd be working in the Kingston Pike right-of-way. The lighting is pretty simple. I don't think they're proposing any pole lights, so I'm not really all that worried about the lighting. It's mainly just wall lights, but I still need the lighting plan sheet and the photometric plot for that to verify that the foot candles are compliant at the property lines, which they'll probably be 0 at all the property lines would be my guess.
Mark, my only concern is that we make a statement here, the access proposed for this development may become the Kingston Pike access for one or both abutting properties. And if that's the case, there's no stacking, certainly in the exit of that. They would have to stack on either side entering into that turn. So if those properties on either side develop, certainly at least one of them is going to have its own access. I can't see how that would be.
Yeah, and it does have enough frontage, the property to the east, to be able to have an access on its own.
And that's
The
what I
one
was
to the
calling
west,
that.
though, probably would have to
Okay.
come through there.
It's just something we need to be aware of,
Yeah.
because there isn't a lot of, there's no room really for stacking the way they've constructed this, except to be in the parking lot,
Yep.
extending through the parking lot.
I wish there was a way to get a real decel lane in there. I know you're dealing with a narrow piece of property, and you can't go on somebody else's property and start tearing it up. And the radius on that helps, but it's really not ideal. And I just don't, I don't think there's a solution tonight to be able to fix that.
Yeah, it's not really a decel. I misspoke. It's just kind of a
Layer.
wide taper as best we could to get to this property line.
Well, you want to try to get the traffic off of Kingston Pike when they're turning in as quickly as possible so they don't get rear-ended is really
Yep.
what it's the purpose of it. But in an ideal world, you'd have about a 100-foot or 125-foot taper that would go all the way back to the east. But it would be very unusual to try to require that at this point, even if it was in the right-of-way. I'm not sure that, but if all of a sudden there was some shared access in the future with the development on the east side of this, that might be something that we need to revisit, because if they're generating more traffic with another development sharing this access,
Yeah, 'cause that's a lot
along with the
bigger
other
property.
stacking that Louise had talked about, it's not ideal, but we also understand you have some constraints with just plain old geometry here, so.
Yeah, the property to the east is quite a bit larger than this
Yeah.
one, so
Yeah.
that would be potentially a time to look at that too, yeah.
To fix that decel lane, yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? And so you're okay with the 16 subject twos?
We are, they were discussed at the earlier meetings, so.
Okay.
Number 8 as well.
Mark, can you put your pointer on the areas that are the pavers again, the permeable pavers?
It's all this shaded area here.
Okay.
And then,
And then that front row?
I think that's it, isn't it, Tim?
It is,
Just that area.
Just the double stack in the front, the main driveway and the parking off the rear driveway. It's shaded gray, but it's just a light duty to heavy duty differentiation.
Well, you got
there.
that heavy duty in there to probably service the dumpster back there.
Correct.
All right, so from you're gonna have to have some area for drainage to daylight out of your pavers. Are you gonna route those all the way around the west side of the building back to the
Exactly.
detention pond?
He hadn't gotten that far, but yeah, I asked him on the way down here.
The good news is usually the pipe's not that big.
It's not. It's a 4-inch under drain, and it'll draw all the water off the gravel bed under the pavers into the detention pond at the rear.
Perfect, okay.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the comments.
It was.
From engineering.
Are we clear on that slope, so what I was getting at on number 8?
Yeah.
We are.
2.5 to 1 versus 2 to 1.
Little shallower.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's got anything in excess of that, but I'll make sure he confirms it. This list went to Will this afternoon. I just got the comments in detail like this afternoon. But we'll begin, obviously, to respond to all these and get them into that full set that you were mentioning, without any duplicated pages.
Tim, you
Sure how
might
that happened.
want to be right. There may be a homeless guy that lives on that property back in
And
the
I may
back
have met
with it. Yeah, so you just, when you're in there with a piece of equipment, you may have already kicked him out when y'all were doing a little bit of grubbing, but,
I just did one of those and kind of kept going when I was first scouting the property, but
so you saw him back there?
I don't know if they're still there or not. I asked my grader when he went, we did a little bit of grubbing to get it clear to do the tree survey. And I said, please watch out and don't run over anybody, because there could be a person on
He
the
makes his
property.
rounds up and down,
See
but
how that-
he may live back there.
Got a summer
so.
home and a winter home.
Yeah, he might. He might have a couple.
I'm not making that in light jest either.
I know,
mean,
I agree.
They do
I'm just
tend to
letting
be
you know,
moving around.
Just be on the
but
lookout for him.
I did not speak to him, though. Just,
Okay, any more questions or
I
comments?
appreciate that, though.
Sure.
I'm going to move to approve with the subject twos.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I did bring some physical samples of the exterior materials. If anyone wants to see them, I'll be glad to leave those with Mark. The color rendering is pretty accurate, but I've got brick and awning and storefront framing samples if anybody would be interested in touching them. Just a new prototype for our client. I don't have any good put-together boards yet, so I just got physical samples, and I'll leave those with Mark, I guess, since I carried them out here.
Building.
Yeah, no, that's good. I have
I'll
a
leave those
set
there
in my
before I
office,
leave.
actually, from
I guess
various
to reconfirm,
projects.
that's brick, not some sort of split-face block.
Correct. It's
Okay.
all, it's two colors of brick,
Yeah.
and the storefront, of course, and the awnings are all metal, so.
Well, good deal. Thank you. Appreciate it, Tim.
Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for Bridgemore, Phase 3B and 4, Parcel 025.03, Tax Map 152, 70.28 acres, 108 lots, zoned R-1 OSR. Fungen, McIndoe and Associates applicants.
This particular, this is actually two phases of Bridgemore, and we looked at this. This is kind of in the northwest part of the subdivision. We looked at an amendment to the concept plan back in June, where they were making some changes due to topography, and the Planning Commission was supportive of those modifications. One of the modifications that we talked about is that they would need a variance request for one of the cul-de-sacs because it will exceed the 500-foot maximum that's allowed in the subdivision regulations, and that would be Road G, which goes down to the south. Basically that road would be an additional 120 feet, 620 feet in length. It's basically this street here that would drop down to the south and end up basically the request for this variance is due to topography. There's a large drainage area. You can kind of see it right here. And to construct a loop street to tie back in to the east would be an issue with that major drainage through there. And frankly, in this zoning district, drainage areas like that are best to remain as open space. So that's kind of the intent of the zoning district itself. So you would need to take action on the variance before we look at the plat. I did note in the packet a little bit, and then in the staff write-up earlier today, that the recommendations that the revised preliminary plat sheets do show some areas that are identified as closed contours. They're being evaluated currently. And of course, if any of those are actually determined to be sinkholes, then it could and it would probably result in some design modifications that will have to come back to you all. But the applicant did want to go ahead and, if you all are okay with it, proceed with presenting the preliminary plat as it is now, with the understanding that it would have to come back to you if they do have to make some design modifications, so as not to hold them up. Another thing that we talked about that's a pretty big issue or consideration with this subdivision is basically as we're kind of working our way toward completing the overall development, we're getting further away from McPhee Road. There is the requirement for the more than one access point, both in the fire code and our subdivision regulations. There's also on the concept plan an access point to Allen Kirby Road. So, this phase has 108 units, 108 lots, and basically the last phase is probably going to have around 44. So it's really time to start looking at the connector road and Allen Kirby Road improvements. So one of the things that the staff will be recommending when we get to the plat is that there would be a letter of credit provided for in assuring that the Allen Kirby Road will be improved to the subdivision regulation requirements. And I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to that point. But that's something that, as you're nearing build out, it's a major improvement that has to occur. So we really need to be thinking about that and providing for it at this point as part of these phases, at least from the staff's perspective. So if you all want to go back to the variance request, if that's okay, we'll, I guess first of all, is the planning commission okay with moving forward with the plat as presented right now, with the understanding that those closed contours could impact the design if they are found to be sinkholes?
I'd like to express a concern along those lines, because
Okay.
in this particular, I guess on the years I've sat here and we've dealt with contingent type approvals and what have you, I'm moved by the number and size and location of the sinkhole, potential sinkholes in
It's
this area.
substantial, yeah.
And so we're kind of betting on that, well, they're going to be proved not to be, and save some time, maybe just between a meeting or what have you. I'm not comfortable with moving forward without knowing that information beforehand.
Well,
I
that's
say
up
that
to you
both
all.
as a member
I mean,
of the EPC and also as a professional engineer.
Yep, and that's up to you all what you're comfortable with. I indicated that I would go ahead and present it, and if you all wanted to, you felt, this is probably the biggest area. This is over in the western area. And again, I don't know if these are sinkholes. I'm just going to point out. But basically, if you follow this, this is where the sinkhole lip or closed contour comes. And it comes well across the street and over in here. I mean, it would impact certainly this street, a number of house lots, the walking trail, although there are provisions in the sinkhole ordinance to allow a walking trail if it's, part of a major, essential connection. But that's a big area that's shown to be within a closed contour, pretty much all of this. This outer line is the 50-foot building setback from the closed contour, and that's an area where no structure with a roof could be placed. So if you look at that in relation to these proposed house lots, a number of them would have to go away. I mean, they just have to completely redesign this.
And that's part of my concern.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just tweaking something. We're talking
Yeah,
about some major revisions.
it would be a redesign, yeah. And there's some other lesser areas, but still could affect some building. This is one on the north part of the property, and I think there's one other one, yeah, here. This one, the sinkhole itself, or I'm not going to call it a sinkhole. The closed contour itself is here, but then you bring out that 50-foot building setback, and obviously it's going to impact this lot, potentially this lot. These would not be plattable as buildable lots if that's in fact determined to be a sinkhole.
What about the
So-
road there?
Yeah, the road.
The road itself actually is not in what's shown to be closed contour, so it could go within the 50-foot area. That's a building setback line. So that one, the real road impact would be the one to the west, which would be the road that the variance is requested on.
I guess I'd like to hear some comments from the applicant on the need for this approval and the consequence of not, and
Okay.
also what's the progress and timeline on evaluating these closed contours.
Okay.
I'm Billy Fulgham with Fulgham McIndoe and Associates. I think with COVID, everything's delayed and everything's taking longer and longer. So my request to Mark is there's absolutely zero risk on anybody's part of going ahead and looking at it and approving it now, because if it is a sinkhole, we would do a redesign. If it's not a sinkhole, then we've just moved forward. It could take them, who knows, I hope a week to get us the data, but the way that things have been going now, it could be 2 months to get us the data, but at least we would have some steps done and behind us so that we could move forward with it with no risk at all.
Still holding your feet to the same fire that we hold everybody else's feet, whether we approve you tonight with the subject to or if not. So I'm actually comfortable moving forward with an approval subject to the determination of these closed contours.
Yeah, as am I.
Yeah, because like I said, as a professional engineer, we would have to redesign it if it was not. So, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was a no-risk thing and an opportunity to move it along.
Well, it also allows you to try to determine, work through some other feasibility things, financing, marketing. I mean, so it does allow you to check some boxes off by getting past this step. Again, really the risk is on you guys and the applicant.
with the risk. We are
You're the one with the
Right.
risk because all of a sudden you're spending time and money and effort on something that you may have to redesign.
Correct.
So you said holding feet to the fire. How many items are you talking about there?
I think Noah said.
Yeah, I was the one that actually used that term. But I guess what I'm saying, I mean, they're still subject to
The
all
sinkholes.
11 items
Yeah.
that would be here, and obviously the big one, which is the unknown, is the determination that that a third party has to make. I mean, last time I dealt with it, it usually has to, you got to get TDEC involved, and there's some other processes that so you've really got a party with that's arm's length that's determining this, and so. So like I said, I'm comfortable with what you presented, and like I said, the risk is on you. You're not getting, eligibility for a grading permit or anything like that. So I don't think there's any misunderstandings. You know what the hurdles still to cross are, and work through these subject twos. And if it helps you kind of move your project along, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I empathize with Ed's concerns, but again, I don't think we're giving you approval to go do anything other than at least that the Planning Commission is supportive generally overall of your design, and that's probably some direction that you need. There's a variance that we've got to deal with that has to do with the length of a cul-de-sac. There's this letter credit issue that with Alan Kirby. So I mean, y'all have a lot of steps that you'd like to get done, and I'm supportive of that, and if it helps you kind of move forward with it, like I said, and we're still holding your feet to the fire with our sinkhole ordinance.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with that as well.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Anybody in the audience?
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion for the variance from the maximum permitted length of a cul-de-sac of 500 feet due to topographical challenges.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
So in terms of the preliminary plat, plat was in pretty good shape. Obviously, the closed contours were the biggest consideration. There were 11 subject twos, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, the design modifications would have to come back to the Planning Commission. That's condition number one, if those closed contours are determined to be sinkholes. And then the letter of credit moving us in a direction toward improvements to Allen Kirby Road. I can tell you that the town engineer kind of did some preliminary calculations, and for that section of road, it kind of forecasted out 6 years. You're looking at about $2.5 million. So it's an expensive road to bring up to the requirements of the subdivision regulations, and that's 2 12-foot lanes. And what was shown on the concept plan was an open ditch section with a 2-foot shoulder, paved shoulder. So that would save some money, but he has to forecast it out, into the future, and kind of assume a worst case scenario. But that's the total road cost. They only front on one side of the road, so just to give you an idea of what that cost roughly could look like, and what the letter of credit in some fashion is going to be. It's going to be a big letter of credit.
What's the design? Is it 12-foot lanes, 40 mile per hour design speed?
I don't know about the design speed.
we really need to address that. I mean, at some
It
point, I
wasn't
know it's,
addressed on the concept plan
Okay.
back in 2004.
it needs to, I know this is a premature discussion, but if we're doing 11-foot lanes on Virtue, we
Yep.
don't need to do 12-foot lanes here.
Yeah.
And it's a collector
Yep.
of sorts. I really don't want to see any more 40-mile-per-hour design speeds if it's unnecessary. It's overkill and it's unnecessary
That
for
would
the
lower
area.
the cost, for sure.
Yes.
Because you're not making as much grade-related corrections.
Yes.
So, yeah.
The good news is you guys have the property adjacent to it, so right-of-way shouldn't be an issue. So you've got a lot of frontage through there, so you're not, not dealing with, some, a lot of times those old property lines will go out to the middle of the road.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But if we're going to have a letter of credit, we probably need to at least have that general idea of what it is,
Yeah.
what our expectations are, because we just can't keep building our roads that fast. We just can't keep doing it.
I support
Yeah.
what Louise is saying on this. I mean, I think generally speaking, I think 11-foot, 2 11-foot lanes and bar ditches would be just fine for it. I mean, it's rural in character.
Yeah.
I think it should stay kind of rural in character.
The open ditch, just like the concept plan.
Yeah.
As long as we know that we're having a trail somewhere along there, that there's a goal for the
Well,
trail.
they're pretty good
along-
about walking trails. They've got a lot of walking trails,
Yeah.
so.
Well, they constructed that mostly along the frontage already.
Okay,
Now, the tie-in trails, they haven't put in yet because those are coming in when they finish those phases to the north. But they do have a main trail that parallels Allen Kirby Road. I mean, it's
Okay.
well off the road,
that's wonderful.
which is excellent.
Yes.
But they did build that with Phase 1.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
One question on that is, we've got 11 items, 10 of them are very objective. They are very timely, and they're very dependent on this scope of work. This item number 2 is not, if I were an investor, I'm trying to think, it's not timely, because who knows when it would be done. I got to put up a letter of credit, for about $5,000 or $10,000 a year for, 1 year to 20 years or whatever. It's not objective as far as the amount that would, the letter of credit would need to be done. And I guess the only thing, the thing that I'm asking is could it be decoupled from this phase and coupled with the last phase of the development?
No. Not in my eyes.
Yeah, you'd be looking at about, well, as the concept shows, about 44 lots in that last phase, and that's, that may not be worth finishing out, So that's not a lot of lots in the last phase. So you got 108 in this phase. So that's why the staff felt that now's the time to start dealing with this in a serious way, and that's why we recommend the letter of credit. Now, we can look at that amount. That was just an estimate that the town engineer put together today for the total cost, inflated 6 years out. But we can certainly look at that, and it's something that probably, depending on the time frame, is something the planning commission would need to assess that letter of credit probably every couple of years if the road project doesn't happen in the next few years, and just reevaluate it.
Now, how much of that road is the town's responsibility?
The other half,
Half?
correct?
Theirs would be the frontage that they have.
Yeah, on their
So-
half. We've been trying to, and I know that we did this with Virtue. When Brookmere came in, they had to improve their half. That's kind of what triggered us to do the Virtue Road project, correct? David? Yes. So we're also looking at Boyd Station now because they've got to improve a massive amount of frontage, and so we're looking at our side of that as well in doing that together. So I can't see how we wouldn't do that with this one as well. I mean, we're kind of getting pushed by development to improve these roads, but they do need to be improved, so
I mean, quite frankly, if we had this concept plan today that we had back then, we couldn't approve it with a single entrance.
No.
We'd have to have two entrances.
Yeah, and the fire marshal's basically been relying on that approved concept plan to not require the second access in previous phases, but it's getting to a point where it's so far removed and so few lots left that it's a serious consideration.
He may get to the
Yeah.
point where all of a sudden he starts triggering like sprinkler systems in
Yes.
all the new houses.
That's
I mean,
right.
which is probably more expensive than the road improvements.
One thing about the fire code, though, a boulevard entrance is considered two entrances per code. So the main entrance into the subdivision, from a fire marshal's perspective, is two entrances.
But we adopted Appendix D, and in Appendix D, it has a separation of the secondary access road. There's a certain separation calculation that doesn't work for that.
Okay.
Any more questions or comments? Anyone in the audience have questions or comments? Are we ready for the variance?
We did the variance.
We're good on the variance we got down.
We ready for the next phase?
I'll make a motion to approve this phase, subject to the 11 items.
Second.
All those in,
Does he agree that we need an agreement first before we?
We don't have to agree. I mean, the motion is the motion.
That's right.
Unless you want to withdraw.
Well, I can't withdraw or agree.
Right. I mean, it's, those subject twos add up in dollars. I mean, we
If it
understand.
doesn't meet the subject twos, then it doesn't,
Right, then it's not approved.
it's not approved.
Okay. Go ahead, Reed.
all those in favor?
I would like to make one comment. I'd like to see a copy of the geotechnical report when it comes in, rather than just the
Yep.
summary answer.
Yeah, we look at those pretty carefully when it comes to sinkholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
fact, it's-
sometimes we have a third party look at them.
Well, I like to be a fourth party.
Had to use a fourth party, yeah.
I'm putting
It
in
is
my
Geo
notes there.
Services that's doing this too, the one that Tim talked about earlier, same company. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you on their list for this to be done? Are you already on their list?
They're supposed to, well, they were supposed to start it yesterday.
Okay, great.
Okay, so, thank you for coming in, and I hope.
Thank you, Billy.
Hope it works out for you.
Good luck.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you all.
Item number 7, discussion on just,
It's still in, number 8. It's gone.
Yeah, we skipped 7.
Number 8.
okay, yeah. Number 8, discussion on additional updates to the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A, zoning, Chapter 4, Section 13, outline outdoor site lighting, and Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix E, guide to residential subdivision street lighting, Town of Farragut applicant.
Yeah, this item came about, well, I guess it was initiated kind of by the ball field light text amendment. We've known for the past couple of years at the staff level that we've needed to revisit our outdoor site lighting requirements in the zoning ordinance. There have been some new lights that people are starting to use that we really don't provide for in our lighting ordinance, but I think we probably would want to encourage, particularly like in the town center, like string lights that you see there on the screen. And then the newer technologies like the LED lights that are being installed pretty much on all projects nowadays. And those can be pretty bright, really bright, frankly. And so we were trying to figure out a way to try to deal with the brightness issue of some of the LED fixtures. And so we solicited the input of a local lighting expert. He actually lives in the town, and he helped us draft the initial outdoor site lighting provisions several years ago. So he he understands what we're trying to do, and he is familiar with the kinds of lights that are in the community. So I asked him to look at string lights. I asked him to look at LED lights, and if there's some language that we could put in our ordinance that would try to address these and maybe minimize, issues that could come about from either of these. So when he looked at the string lighting provisions, he came up with a number of recommendations. And we talked about these at the staff developer meeting on October 5th. So some of those would include obviously we don't want blinking lights. That could be a distraction. May want to just have, like light beige type lights like you see on the screen. Perhaps even just a single strand. That's something that could actually be performance based instead of number of strands that you have. But one of the things that he really felt like we needed to focus on, not only with string lights but also with the LED, was to look at the color temperature ratings of lights, as that's something we haven't looked at in the past, and that's called Kelvin. And just to show you what that means, let me pull up something here. Kelvin is just basically the higher the Kelvin number, the brighter and potentially more distracting the light source could be. So what he recommended for the string lights, again, these are lights that you're probably trying to create kind of an ambiance with them, a softer kind of feel. So he was recommending to not go above probably a 3000 K, and you can see that that's lower. It's kind of on the warm white light, as opposed to the really bright that you would see when you get up around 7000 K. So looking back at these lights, again, you want them to create kind of a softer feel. So the K value can give you that. Some other things to look at is what kind of illumination are you getting under the lights in the patio areas, because you want to make sure they're bright enough to be safe, but not overly harsh. So he said we could add some foot candle requirements in there that they would show on the foot candle measurement plot with the lighting plan, so that the areas directly under the string lights would not be able to exceed 5 foot candles, or 3 foot candles if it was surrounded by a residential area, like in a mixed-use neighborhood potentially. And then the individual bulbs would not be able to exceed 300 delivered lumens. And what he means by delivered lumens there is there's sometimes a light source has a lot of wasted light. So the delivered luminous is actually the light that gets out of the fixture and actually illuminates the intended surface. Some light goes back into the fixture, so that doesn't count. So having delivered lumens really is a better performance standard, because you're measuring exactly the output of the light. So that's what he recommends for the string lights. And then for the LED light concern, again, looking at the Kelvin, adding that, keeping most of our existing provisions, the foot candle, half a foot candle at the property line, or 3 foot candles at the property line if it's commercial, is a good standard. But the having a Kelvin standard for the exterior non-residential lighting would help to address the brightness of some of the newer LED fixtures and potentially glare, which is another thing that's been a little tricky to try to measure. So in a case like that, the recommendation was to not exceed, I think it was 4,000 K for any non-residential exterior lights. That could be wall and pole lights or any other type of lights. And, maybe in certain parts of the town, like mixed-use neighborhood areas or town center areas, we could even lower that to maybe 3,000 or 3,500 to create, again, that softer overall light look. It would kind of create a different look and feel for those areas, as opposed to the more traditional arterial commercial areas or regional commercial areas out near the interstate. And then just to clean up some of the other language, clarifying some things about for example, the fixture orientation, making sure that it's horizontal in nature and parallel with the ground. Because sometimes we're finding that people, sometimes when they install these LEDs, they'll like to tilt it up a little bit. And the problem with that is now you're getting some glare because it's not shining the light straight down to the intended target. So, and that will give us a little bit more teeth in the ordinance to address those kind of issues. And then, if you're going to have a non-horizontal material that would allow light through, like a decorative wall light fixture, that it has to be frosted or somehow the lens surface has to conceal that light source so that it's not creating, again, uncontrolled glare. So that's some of the things that we're thinking about, but we wanted to get your all's input on it. I can very easily put these in an ordinance, I think, we of course have to consider the ball field light issue at some point. I'm not sure if that's coming back next month or not, but, and try to address probably all that at one time. But that's
Mark,
what we're thinking about on the other provisions, yep.
I did want to state, because I had some residents reach out to me today because they were confused about the two different items,
Yep.
and they just wanted assurances that the discussion here is not like a backdoor for these ball field lights to be approved.
Yeah, this is completely separate from that. We just saw that with the ball field light amendment, it was an opportunity for us to go ahead and just look at the outdoor site lighting provisions as a whole.
And that's what I
that's what we're
explained to
trying to
them.
do.
Yes, that's what I explained to
Yeah,
them.
because lighting is kind of like, it's like telecommunications, and frankly, we may develop new standards and it become outdated in 2 or 3 years because it's just a constantly evolving technology for the better.
For a minute there, I thought you were going to say we were going to go address our telecommunications ordinance again, and that's when I'm going to quit.
Yeah. So far, that's going okay, I think. So,
Mark, I have an observation with the string lights.
yeah.
Does the town staff have a handheld light meter that you can measure foot candles?
No, we don't.
The reason why I mention this is if there's a restaurant in town with a patio that would be a candidate for string lights, you're going to have $100 worth of string lights, but you're going to be required to do about a $2,000 electrical engineering plan, which has to be done by an electrical engineer for string lights. And it just seems like there should be just an easier. I'm not talking pole lights. I'm not talking ball field lights. Any kind of permanent lights that's different. But string lights, which are pretty darn innocent in nature, and I would think there's a consensus with that. That it seems like there should be an easier way for somebody that would want to do string lights other than having to go to an electrical engineer and having a formal plan designed and presented to the town of Farragut. Because like I said, you're dealing with $100 worth of string lights, and I don't know an electrical engineer in town that would draw the plan and submit the plan. You're going to spend anywhere less than $2,000.
Yeah, we actually did talk about that with him because, and there's different ways that you could evaluate that. I think the thing is you would have these standards in place, and the way that we talked with Mr. Pilson about it was, I mean, we could always look at those kind of lights in the field, and if we felt like they were, they didn't create issues, then we'd be good with it. But if we saw something that was just really kind of egregious and it was creating a kind of an annoyance, then we would ask them to go ahead and evaluate that.
Present a plan.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So there is some common sense approach to this. Okay, I appreciate that.
We talked about that. It was just something he said, if you're going to establish some standards, you might want to look at the area that's actually illuminated in these patio areas where you would have these string lights. Because if you're not, it can get too dark, actually.
Right.
and be kind of a safety issue. Maybe the wait staff can't see where they're going, or
You need to
know,
read the
just-
menu, and so, especially
So
when you get older
it's-
like me, you need all the light you
Yeah,
can
me
get when
too.
you're trying to read the
Yeah.
menu.
So I think we could,
Cell phones for.
yeah, but for lights like that, I
Don't think
mean,
about it.
we can just kind of evaluate them in the field, and if
Okay.
they look like they would be okay, then, I mean, from my perspective, we'd be fine with that.
Okay.
I'm concerned about the single strand.
Again, we don't have to go with that either.
Okay.
I mentioned that we could evaluate it on a performance-based standard rather than just basing
What does
it
that
on the
mean,
number of.
performance-based standard? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's these other provisions, like the
Okay.
3000 K.
Yeah.
And the foot candles and all that.
lumens.
Okay.
Yeah.
The staff might want to look at, I don't know if you've ever had, it felt like you needed to measure foot candles, but I don't think the device is that expensive to keep one in the office, and that way you can,
It's right there.
Yeah, I made a note of
You can buy
that.
an app, will do it.
Let's see about that. See,
Yeah.
there
Cell
are,
phone.
Cell
There
phone
are
has-
some
you can buy an
cheaper
app.
ones.
You can buy an app for your cell phone that does it.
oh, well, yeah, okay, there you go.
There's an app for that, too.
There's an app for that.
Yeah,
so it's,
really,
when you refer to single strand, this is kind of picking up, I think, maybe Louise or Rita, or somebody had mentioned, is this what you're calling single strand?
yeah, that
I
would
mean,
be
so
single strand,
anything other than single strand would be like two strands right next to each other?
yeah.
Have you, is that
Oh,
is that
okay.
common?
I've never seen it.
So I haven't
I
seen
mean,
that
we
either.
saw some pictures on the internet where
Okay.
it was really busy.
Well, no, I think single strand, I think it's appropriate
I
there.
wasn't understanding what he meant by that.
Well, I didn't really either,
I thought,
but
like, one single strand could have 30 lights on it. That's not going to get you anywhere.
Non-carnival. So we'll try.
I've seen some that where it's just a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And it was just overload.
Well, I think the
that
light-
would probably not meet the performance standard.
that's
either.
true.
Yeah.
You'd be way over 5-foot candles under that patio area
Yeah.
if you did that.
I have a question about the softness or not softness.
Kelvin?
How does that relate to safety? Is a softer light less safe, or?
Well, that's hard to answer that. I think it depends on a lot of factors, but it is a common it's common to think that the brighter the light, the safer it is, but that's actually not the case. It's actually probably more unsafe the brighter the light is.
You look into it and you have
Hurts your
a,
eyes, yeah.
you have a glare that.
Yeah,
that
the glare,
very quickly messes
Yeah.
with your eyes, and then you look down and, yeah.
so really when you start getting up around 6,000 K, it potentially is more unsafe because it's too bright and it's almost blinding.
Anybody else have any questions or comments tonight?
I'm
Anybody?
comfortable with,
Comfortable with those standards? I thought we had a really good input from him on that, and,
No, I remember I learned quite a few things the last time that I
Yeah.
never thought about
yeah.
when he did that presentation.
Yeah, Bart and I have talked about Kelvin for a while, because we've seen been to webinars and things with dealing with lighting, and that was,
You can actually see the difference in the lights in the room. Like, for
Yep.
instance, these Trofer lights are probably 4,000, and then these cans have more of the bright white.
yep, they're
and
higher than that.
they're probably closer to 5,000 or 6,000.
Right, yep. That's a good comparison, really, 'cause you can see the difference there.
This was for discussion only tonight?
Yeah.
And your,
So it can develop the ordinance.
I'm concerned that we might be complicating it a little bit to try to address different light standards in different areas, like the mixed-use neighborhood or town center, as opposed to, I think that we just need to have one set standard for,
Yeah, it makes sense, yeah.
and not worry about where it is.
And I guess in that regard, do you all have a preference on so you're looking at this K, are you comfortable with 4,000 K in a commercial, or should it be a little lower like that 3,500?
I would think that you would want to go with the higher limit on that too, and allow the residential could go up to 4K, but if it is, in a business setting, they've got that max that they could probably dial back down if
Yeah,
they
they
felt like
could.
they needed to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think we should be,
And they're not going to want the glare either.
yeah, I think we should
Up
provide
to
guidance,
4.
but we don't want to be too restrictive.
Yeah.
Most commercial is around 4,
Yeah.
so, I mean, that's a pretty common standard. So, okay, that's fine, that's fine.
I don't want to get into specialized lighting that is normally used, and then it'd be too, rated too high, and then they're having to get into something they'd have to special order.
Yes, yeah.
Ready to move on then? Yeah. Okay. Item number 10, discussion on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A zoning, Chapter 3, Section 14, B7E, to provide for a canopy sign protruding more than 1 foot from the building wall on one building elevation. ARCO Murray Construction applicant.
There's actually 2 or 3 things we wanted to bring up under this agenda item, but Topgolf's asked us to look at the provisions associated with their use in this zoning district, the Outlet Drive Entertainment Employment District north of the interstate. As you may remember, we created that district, and we also created a lot of signage provisions specific to that district and some specific to this use, this type of use. So one of the things that that they're asking to be revisited deals with the canopy light that's on the front of the building. They have a canopy at the main entrance, and basically the sign they would like to have is mounted to the edge of the canopy. The canopy is about 5 feet off the wall, and in our sign ordinance, it only provides for wall signs, and those have to be within a foot of the wall, mounted within a foot of the wall. They could be thicker than that, so it didn't really provide for this kind of sign. So that's one thing that they're requesting. In the write-up dealing with this matter, staff is supportive of that. It's kind of a unique building and a unique signage package, I guess, and so we understand the logic of what they're asking for. This would be specific to this zoning district and specific to this use. I do think that we're recommending that if we do amend that we tie it to structural canopies that are integral to the architecture of the building, which this is, that it is channel letter signs, not box signs or cabinet signs, which this also is. And it would not be an additional sign. It's just simply one of the 2 wall signs that's currently provided for on the front of the building. So it wouldn't change the square footage that's being provided, just simply allow them to move that sign out to the edge of the canopy. So I don't know if y'all want to talk about these individually as I go through them, or if you want me to just go through these and then we'll come back to them, or if you have a preference. That's one of the requests.
I'm comfortable with the requests that you have here. I'm comfortable with what's stated here.
With those parameters?
As am I.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so,
It's a
This-
unique application, it's a unique location,
yeah,
so
it
I think
is.
we're good.
The second item that came up was dealing with the wall signs that are on the ends of the building. Let me see if I can point this out. But you got the interstate here, and then there's a sign proposed here, a wall sign here, and then a wall sign here. And the way that our sign area ratios work is that the sign area provided is a proportion to the width of the building wall in which the sign is mounted. So in the case of these walls, these are about 35 feet wide, so that these 2 signs are based on a 1-to-1 ratio of sign area to building wall. What they would like to do is to be able to consider the frontage of this as well on this sign, and then the frontage of this on this sign, because you kind of see that whole wall and you don't really see that difference in perception and the inset of the building. on each of those ends. So it's kind of a flared hitting wall that you have on these edges. It's a very unique building. The shape of it is, we don't have many buildings that are shaped like that. So one of the ways to potentially deal with that is, on the front of the building, the signs that we looked at earlier, you got the canopy sign we talked about, and then you got that logo that is the Topgolf logo, and those are allowed a sign area of 2 to 1 based on the width of that building, and you count them separately. So one thing you could consider if you wanted to revisit this language too is to go to a 2 to 1 ratio on these ends, and that way you're not changing how we really apply the sign area in relation to building width. You're just changing the ratio so that all the wall signs for that building are 2 to 1 instead of, some of them are 2 to 1, some of them are 1 to 1. So that's something for y'all to think about. But that's something that they wanted to have looked at as well. The reason for the proportionality is just to try to make the wall sign proportionate to the building width on which they're mounted. But again, this is a unique area, unique part of the town. It's interstate visible, and the building is very uniquely shaped. So those are some things to think about. And this, if we did change this language, this would be, again, specific to this building, this district, or this type of use in this district. And then I think the third thing that they wanted to talk about would be the master deed that deals with the pylon sign. When we were putting that language together to provide for the kind of a pylon sign for that zoning district in that corridor, it's called a master development sign. A couple of the provisions, and we talked about these at the time, was that there needed to be, you got the regional entertainment facility like Topgolf, and then we wanted to have at least 2 additional regional oriented businesses or tenants, because it's really a sign that's, and I don't have an image of this because this kind of came up last minute, but it's really a sign that's kind of mirrors the sign in the city of Knoxville on the south side of the interstate. They have that Turkey Creek sign over there that's multiple tenant. So that was the idea, is that it's not a sign for Topgolf, it's a sign for Topgolf plus at least 2 other tenants that would have the opportunity to have representation on that kind of corridor pylon sign. And then there's some physical parameters associated with that. So that's one of the things that, in looking at this, Topgolf's the only entity right now that we have. We have a couple others that are, interested and would be potential candidates for the other space on this sign, but they haven't submitted anything. It would seem to me, in kind of looking at this language, and I could run this through the town attorney, but one of the provisions in this portion of this zoning district is that there's a requirement for a recorded declaration provided to the town for the use of the sign. And to me, I think that is really where you would need to capture these other spaces and who would have an opportunity to have representation on this sign. And then tie that to some kind of a concept plan that is associated with the properties that would have uses that could use this sign as well in the future when they do come about, because these properties may not develop for 2 or 3 years, and I think Topgolf's perspective is they would like to go ahead and move forward with their pylon sign, which will be presented to the VRB next week, just to get their thoughts on the looks of it, because I don't have an image of it right here. and then, move forward with having their name on it with the understanding that the other tenants would come whenever those properties are developed.
So-
But the declaration would kind of memorialize that on the front end.
So just for clarity, the way it's written in the ordinance is that needed to all be settled before the pylon sign was installed?
It just says a master sign, this is a permitted use for unified development, and it says that is a development that includes a regional recreational entertainment facility and at least 2 additional regional-oriented businesses or tenants. And then it is subject to, and it has a list of kind of physical requirements for those associated with the sign.
Okay, so they're not trying to get rid of the two
No.
individual businesses, we just don't have them yet.
That's right.
So it
and-
doesn't seem,
And their request is to not hold them up just because there's a timing issue with getting the other 2 tenants.
I would
think if
agree
you
with
could
that.
capture that, to me, if you could capture that in your declaration and tie it to property and maybe potentially even a concept of the 3, at least Topgolf and the 2 other ones.
All on the same pylon,
Yeah.
similar, very similar to
It
what
would
we
be
have at
like
the
an
dentist office.
exhibit to the declaration, and it would be tied to properties that whoever develops on
This
this
property gets
tract
that.
and this tract
Okay.
is also going to have this
Okay.
space and this space.
I'm comfortable with that.
So that requirement is satisfied, but it also acknowledges the timing issue
Yes.
that you could have, especially in these kind of unusual times. And, it could be a few years before all 3 of them are built out.
Yeah.
So that's what they're requesting in that regard.
Where is this going to be located?
That's on the highway, isn't it?
It would be kind of to the, it's to the east of, where the billboard used to be? They've taken that down. It's a little bit to the east of that.
It'll be on the highway side, yeah.
Yeah.
Getting back to the second one, 2-to-1, 1-to-1.
Yeah.
I don't really have when I look at the examples, the larger signs to me look far more appropriate given the scale of that building. I don't know that people realize when you look at the Anytime Fitness sign, we have 4 bays.
Yeah, that's right.
So with our 1-to-1, if you drive by, our sign is bigger than the rest of the other
That's
signs.
true.
And
That's a
most
good
people
point.
probably don't recognize that, but Jay said, if I can't have my purple running man, I'm getting the biggest sign I can get. And he filled up that space. So I don't know that it's all that noticeable to anyone who's not paying attention to sign sizes. So I don't have an issue with this. And when I look at the depictions, the larger sign looks to me far more appropriate for the size of that building because of what you say, that it's not
Yeah.
just that end, you're seeing the other
that whole
side.
side, yeah. It's not on the same horizontal plane, which is required in our sign ordinance, but it is something that could be addressed in this district for this use, so it would be specific to that. Because frankly, like Costco, I have an image of that. They wanted to count their frontage that was on the horizontal plane with Kingston Pike,
Yeah.
but they wanted the sign on this angled portion. So basically, they had to put the sign as a 1-to-1 ratio of this angled portion. So, that's kind of, but it's not in it's not in
It's
the
not in the same plane
outlet
or same,
drive area. But plus, I think, it's pretty visible as to where that's at. So
yes.
hopefully they've been okay with the signage that they have.
I don't think it's hurting them.
That's good, yeah. So that's their request, and they have representatives here if you have some specific questions for them. And that's about all I have on that, so.
We'll start out with asking you to give your name and address, and then we'll see if you have anything you want to say additional.
Sure. Good evening, Todd Waldo, Topgolf, 8750 North Expressway, Dallas, Texas. Good to be back with you all again. It's been a while, but we're very excited about Topgolf, a little closer to reality here with the planned opening summer of next year and trying to work out a few details that seem to be well received, and just some technicalities that we're working through. But really, if there's any questions of me, it seems like really just trying to have signage that matches the scale of the building. These are all signs that you've seen before previously as part of the review of the project originally, with the building elevations that were shown. So there's no new signage that's being proposed. It's all similar to what you've seen previously. And really just trying to create a very unique destination and get the Topgolf branding and word mark in a visible location, not only from the customer base that arrives at the site location, but also along the I-40 corridor as well. So we're hopeful that this will be well received, and happy to answer any questions. I do have something I can pass around. I only have one copy of this,
Okay,
but this is in respect to the developer-provided pylon sign, which, as you recall, we agreed to remove the billboard sign from the site, which has been removed previously, in order to install this 50-foot tall pylon sign. So this is just a preliminary rendering of that, but I'll pass that around. And all we're hoping to do is to be in a position where this can be installed prior to grand opening. And I'll pass that around. That we have the ability to install that prior to grand opening, and then the balance of the master development, the additional tenants that may trail a longer period of time. Really, we've all experienced some COVID delays, which has delayed that portion of the development. So we're hopeful that that would be something that you all would agree to as well, that we get the Topgolf panel on that shared pylon sign, and the additional tenants will follow as they come online in the future.
That's what we've done with, actually with Starbucks. It's got the pylon, and it's got the sign, and they were there, and then as it filled in with full bar, and the dentist office, they all.
Yeah, so the sign rendering that's being circulated around now, that is a 3-tenant sign, so multi-tenant, but 3 tenant panels on the 50-foot tall pylon sign. It's similar to what was shown previously, just providing the detail of the Topgolf panel. And as Mark alluded to, this will go through VRB next week for comment. But really just wanting to have that opportunity to install it sooner rather than later, and have it in place prior to opening the venue.
Anybody else have any questions?
Is Farragut Station the nomenclature that you're going to be placing on that
Yes,
development?
sir. Yes, sir. That's the name of the development.
Yeah.
It certainly needs to be in place before the grand opening.
Yes, sir. We agree.
But if you place it now, or 2 or 3 months from now, will you have people driving in to play golf when there's nothing finished yet?
No, it's just the sequencing of getting that sign in conjunction with the construction of our outfield. We're going to be putting in some pretty large net poles in the near future, and just having the ability to get that sign in where we have clear access at this moment, as opposed to being pinned in once balance of the improvements are in place.
Okay.
In order to get a crane in to set that.
Probably so for that, for the steel associated with that. But, we're going to have, as you've seen, there's cranes out there now. There's cranes out for the net poles, and really just trying to get a little bit more working space to place that sign. And it will be generally in the location of the former billboard.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Mark, if you got what you need?
Are you all comfortable with what I presented as ways
Yes.
to deal with that? Okay.
That's good.
Okay. Yep.
Across the board.
Sounds good. You need
All
this
right,
back?
thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, thank
You
you.
want this back, Tom?
Yes, please.
Michelle, you want a photo of it?
Snapshot.
You know, PR you can.
Mark, Before we
It'll
do
be in VRZ
get on to
next
this
week.
one, discussion on field-related requirements. We had, when we were talking with the lighting, we were talking about in the field. Will you differentiate for the audience what we talk about as field as opposed to the baseball field or soccer field or something?
You talking about field right here on
Right,
this, in
right,
this
mhm.
context? Yeah, that, I probably should just say site-related requirements.
Yeah, yeah, that
That's a
makes
good
it,
idea.
We call it field and just informally around the office, but it probably needs to be site-related
Okay.
requirements.
I know somebody had a question when we were talking about the lighting, and is
Yeah.
this,
Yeah, no,
So-
that has nothing to do with the ball field lighting. Yep.
so item number 11, discussion on field-related requirements that must be satisfactorily completed prior to a final plat being considered for approval by the planning commission, and this is also for discussion only. And let me go back to number 11. When this comes before us again, do you have any idea when that will be on the,
Top golf,
uh-huh,
that'd be next month.
next month?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty easy.
oh, number 10, you mean?
Number 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are easy since it's specific to the district and the use. It's pretty easy to change that. Yeah, this item is something that we've kind of dealt with 2 or 3 times here recently with the Planning Commission. What we did last month, we had a final plat that was presented to you all, and we provided you with a checklist that the staff several months ago got together and created a checklist, basically so that we would have things organized and we wouldn't miss things. Trying to make sure that everything was in place and in order with these site-related requirements, and nothing was dropped. So we created that, and we've had a couple of projects recently that's where they've come before you with a final plat approval request, and from a staff's perspective, they really just weren't there. They weren't complete, and it really kind of puts all parties really in an awkward position. It puts you all in an awkward position. It puts the staff, and frankly, the applicant as well. So what we tried to do was take those lessons from a couple of planning commission meetings. I mean, this plat that we looked at last month was conditionally approved, and they provided a 3-month letter of credit to address, non-urgent site completion items, things that weren't life safety, but still had to be finished in a timely manner. So we kind of went back and internally and tried to talk about how we could try to avoid this in the future. And one thing that we did was look at our checklist, and we identified certain items on the checklist that, from a staff's perspective at least, would absolutely have to be finished before a final plat was presented to the Planning Commission for approval. In general, those items are safety related, whether it's signage, backfilling curbs, making sure that walking trails are properly drained so they're not slick and unsafe, things like that. And we show those as red in the checklist and have a description at the start of the checklist that talks about that. We talked internally about, all right, when will those site-related items need to be finished so that when it does come to the Planning Commission, we've got a proper recommendation. And it seemed to us that we would treat the required site items the same as we would with plan resubmittal deadlines. So we've got the initial submittal, we review an initial plan, we have a staff developer meeting, and then the Monday after the staff developer meeting, plans are required to be resubmitted. So on that same deadline, we will check the site and evaluate the site for those items that we've identified in red. And if those were not complete, then we would simply let the applicant know that we will be recommending that that item be removed from the agenda under the approval of agenda when it comes before the Planning Commission. Of course, if y'all are in agreement with this kind of process and deadlines and items that we've identified, then we would let the applicants know early on that here's the expectations. You're going to have the checklist. In fact, there's a place for them to sign that they've received the checklist and understand it. So there shouldn't be any surprises. This is our expectations. You need to plan accordingly, and because you know what we're going to be looking for. And if they're not ready, we have no choice but to recommend that it be taken off the agenda. So that's kind of what we're proposing. That makes it more organized. There's quite a few things in here that we don't have that would have to be finished eventually, but they could potentially be addressed with the letter of credit or in some other fashion, maybe holding up building permits if needed on some of these. But we did go through the checklist, and as I mentioned earlier, just tried to identify those things that, from a staff's perspective, really were critical and really could be safety issues if they weren't properly addressed. And they need to be at a point of completion when those projects come to you all. So that's what we're proposing. We wanted to get your all's feedback on that, and then move forward with probably presenting a resolution for y'all to look at next month, but depending on how you all feel about this. We did also look at the time frame on a number of recent projects that it took from when the Planning Commission approved the final plat, and the plat was actually signed by the town, which is the town engineer and the secretary of the Planning Commission. And does it really, putting off a project another month because they're not ready with the site, what is the impact to the timeline? And you can see that a lot of the projects were well over a month between when the plan was approved and when the actual plat was signed. So it really didn't impact their timeline at all. And again, these expectations are going to be presented to the contractors and the applicants on the front end. So they're going to know what we're looking for and when it's needed, so that we don't end up with these situations that we've had recently where it puts all of us in an awkward position.
Mark, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm well pleased with the comments you included here, but also, you said safety, it's also environmental. There's some key
absolutely.
environmental aspects to this. And I know you mentioned it, but one of my comments when I read that in preparation for the meeting was the attestation aspects of, I'm signing up to this. And the timing of it, I think it's a good step forward. But has this been vetted at all with some of the developers? Or
Nope, I haven't sent it to anybody.
Okay.
I think, Mark, you've done a great job with this. I think one of the things that's near and dear to me is that all excess debris and brush and trash being removed from the premise area.
For that phase,
That right there is something that seems to be overlooked quite often.
My only concern is, and I've expressed this before, is you can't grow grass in July. I mean, you can, but then you've got it watered, you got it sprouting, and 2 days later, the sun's baking it. I did not have an issue with requiring quite a hefty bond to bond the grass if they're trying to get approval in July, August timeframe. I have no problem with providing some kind of requirement that in 60 days, if there isn't 75% growth, that we hold up building permits or whatever we need to, whatever it is we need to do to bring them back to the table to address it. But I struggle with requiring someone to try and grow grass in July.
Louise, I'll make one comment. Leeway, I had that concern, but when I read this, I interpreted the language right before it says vegetation stabilization. It says completed to the town's satisfaction in a timely manner, but may be covered by letters of credit or other measures.
Okay.
I was thinking that I encompassed that, but if it doesn't, maybe we can make it, your point stronger.
Yes, I would feel more comfortable with that. And hopefully, we don't hit that very often, but
It's going to happen.
it's going to happen.
It has happened.
Yeah.
And I think that allows us to have some common sense into this, that one sentence.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, that would be under 1. I mean, yeah, that, from our perspective, and I agree with you, it is challenging in the middle of summer to get perennial grass, and in the winter, it's a challenge to get anything but rye to come up, so.
And then you don't want to just leave it rye and not have anything.
Die out,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
one of the real problems that we've seen on a couple of these recently, though, is a bigger issue than just the grass stand. It was the fact that the areas where they should have been finished grading were a complete disaster. Cloddy, just completely
Still rough.
undressed slopes that would, I mean, they wouldn't be mowable. You'd tear
Yeah.
up your equipment trying to deal with them. And then just, the drainage situation, the drainage easement areas that would be platted as drainage easements were non-functional and really kind of just really in bad condition. I mean, they weren't tied into anything. That there's kind of those kind of issues from our perspective, have to be in order before it's presented to you all. Whether we could deal with the grass stand and, I don't know, whether you can place mat on it, or you could certainly do rye or some temporary grass stand in the winter. But the main thing from us is you've dressed that soil where you're finished grading. I'm not talking about where you're getting ready to build a house or things like that. I'm talking about where you're finished, like on these slopes that we've seen on a couple of projects where they should have had those dressed and ready. That soil needs to be prepared in a proper condition. And
Well, that's a little bit different. I mean, obviously, that's an
That's what I'm
extra,
talking
that's an
about.
extra condition on top of that's a separate condition from the grass, which could be bonded, but certainly insisting that, here's the thing, is when you get that summer downfall, what happens to that smooth surface? I don't know.
The roads.
yeah, I mean, it would be a problem until you get some kind of rooted
Yeah.
surface in there, or you mat it
Well-
and tie down the mat real well on the
And
slope.
I guess that's what I'm trying to puzzle through. What is a reasonable solution to alternative?
Yeah,
If
at
you're in
different types of
July
the year,
and
yeah.
you're not going to get a grass stand, what's an alternative that, obviously what we're trying to do is stabilize that ground and not have runoff, requiring a silt fence installation.
Socks.
It's, what I want is, I guess, another checklist for that July, August timeframe
Okay.
that we can tie them to say, okay, we understand you can't grow grass, but here's what you have to do instead. And it's not necessarily, it needs to
I'll
be.
talk about that in the second
protecting
part of
us.
that, of
I
that.
think
It
the
needs
staff's
to be
going to have to look at
specific.
certain locations on that site. It's not going to be one uniform site. There's
Yeah.
going to be other areas that are going to be more intense relative to what could be summer runoff and erosion
Yep.
than others. So I think we've got to use some common sense back into the process, because there isn't
There's
a
no
formula.
one, no, there's no formula.
Because you don't
Yeah.
know, how, is it going to be 2-week drought? Is it gonna be, and then a gully washer, or is it gonna?
Yeah, I mean, we acknowledge that that's a challenge in that second part of number one. We talk about early coordination with town staff is strongly recommended if attempted stabilization is likely to occur when permanent grass cover establishment could be challenging. For example, very hot, cold, or dry seasons.
I think we're looking for a reasonable effort
So
Yeah.
that,
to mitigate.
So,
And
I agree. A couple of these things that we've
Just
seen
ignore it.
lately had very little effort.
yes,
Um,
Okay.
And that was what was our problem.
so early coordination with town staff means, okay, you're going to be in July, so
What's your
what's the plan here?
Yeah, what's your plan so that you can, I mean, maybe we can massage that first one a little bit to acknowledge what you're talking about. Because, I mean, I agree with you. It's a challenge to, and I wouldn't want somebody going out there and just dumping a bunch of water to get grass to come in for a few days and
And
then it
then-
just bake again.
Yeah,
We've done that in the past.
Yeah. and that's
it-
not the goal. The goal is not to do that. The goal is to have a stabilized,
Yeah,
yeah, the goal's not a checklist item, is
yeah.
per se, oh, I checked the box,
There's a
we did
reason
it.
for this.
You know, our
Yeah.
objective is to have a favorable outcome.
our goal is that the grading itself is to a point where at the appropriate time that you could introduce grass and it's going to take. I mean, the soil has been dressed, it's smoothed. Maybe they have to roll it with mats to keep it stable until you can get, some kind of a permanent grass stand to come in because, the weather's kind of weird anyway, and it's what used to be the best time of year was September to grow cool season grasses, and now becoming
October,
potentially even early November.
yeah.
So it's kind of all over the place. But yeah, we can look at that first one and talk about it internally and
Okay,
figure out something.
that was my only concern.
Is there any others on there that, from your all's perspective, that I haven't given this to anybody else because frankly, this is the town's expectations. And if you all are in agreement with it and that's the standards that you feel are appropriate for when a final plat's presented to you, then that's what they need to do. I mean, it's not a negotiation.
Well, it's unfortunate, but we have to be fairly specific as to what we want.
Solution-wise,
Yeah.
Noah, you've not said anything, and
Well, quite
I
frankly,
think you,
these have been the town's expectations for many years.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
I think what we're really just trying to do is we're trying to,
Communicate.
I think the town's actually done a good job communicating these expectations. I think you kind of all, after what happened last month, you probably all kind of know where I stand on this. So I don't think we're really doing anything new here. I think what we're really doing is we're trying to make it a little bit more transparent and remove any ambiguity about what those expectations are.
Make sure that UNA.
we just don't want people coming up to the microphone and sitting there and wanting to argue with you about, why you should do something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Know well ahead of time, and it's not going to be on the agenda. So, and we have to be consistent, like Noah said last time. Everybody needs to be treated exactly the same way and the same expectations. So that's another thing with this checklist, is that everybody knows what they have to have finished, and it's consistent, and it's very objective, and, there aren't any surprises, so. I just didn't know if y'all had any others that you saw in looking at the checklist that you thought either maybe shouldn't be or should be added, if you felt like that was sufficient as far as the ones we identified.
I think we also need to kind of be careful in the landscaping area concerning trees and shrubs, because a good example is what's happening at Fee Park.
What's happening over there?
Well, they had trees and bushes that sit there in a ball for months and months and months and months.
Oh, yeah.
And then they finally put them in, and then, of course, what happened is, we got quite a few that died,
Yeah.
okay? Where if they'd have been in something to where they could have been watered instead of sitting there on that asphalt baking, in that ball, that root ball.
It's a
You
problem.
should come out to Ivy Farms. We got quite a few dead trees because they planted them in July.
Well, see, we're back to that again, see?
Yeah.
Not only grass, but
Yeah.
I think the tree and bush thing is just as critical.
Checklist, man.
Easton Park was replacing trees today, or some of the shrubs they put out right on the greenway.
That was one question or concern I had. We're not just talking grass, we're talking other things too. Do we need to be more
No,
specific?
yeah, we talk about a lot of things in this checklist. Signage, we talk about drainage
Yeah,
easements.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so, I mean, if these areas where you're platting a drainage easement, that's generally going to be an area that's going to have a lot of drainage. So that's why we want to focus on that as opposed to more small-scale drainage along lot lines and, that you could address when you're building individual houses. We're talking about the major platted.
Wells,
Yeah, like the one back there at the Toad Slope behind Sugarwood. That's
Yeah.
a major drainage way, and that was nowhere near ready when it came to you all. So that's the kind of areas that we want to focus on. And then having your silt fence, if we go out there and their erosion control measures, although they ought to stay on top of this throughout the whole project, but if we go out there on our inspection and we find a lot of issues with their erosion control, then they're not going to be on the agenda. Because they should have been maintaining that all along. And hopefully we stay on top of them, so that shouldn't be an issue. Because we do periodic inspections of these projects and make sure that their erosion control measures are properly maintained and functioning in accordance with their plans.
You don't want them to wait till the last minute and say, we need to put a silt fence up.
That's right.
When that silt fence they first put up has been down for 3 months.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we saw that the other day, yeah. So, yeah. Well, did you want me to look at something with the trees and shrubs as a requirement, or just?
I think that's kind of hard because they die, well, I mean, they were living and then they died and that's something we still can hold.
Yeah,
it.
that's kind of where I was coming from on that.
We
They
can-
would be even more sensitive to improper times of the year, because really trees really should never be planted unless it's like November, December, January, generally in that time frame.
Well, and you would think that they would be motivated to replace that because it's not a really good selling point to have people drive
Yeah.
in and see dead trees.
Yeah,
But
Well,
then,
it's expensive too, so.
unless it's in a buffer where they don't maybe pay as much attention to that, so. Okay, well, that's good
That-
feedback. I think we
Yes, good job.
got that, so hopefully we'll be better with those in the future.
Item number 12, approval of utilities. We've had one already and
Yeah, I don't have any others.
others, okay. And citizens forum, do you have any
I
cards?
don't have any that signed up to speak
Okay.
under citizens.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye.